Well, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time. I'm really, really thrilled to welcome Kirsten Zeigler. I'm going to give a quick intro, read her bio. But, I think this topic, it's really near and dear to my heart. I think, burnout globally continues to be a growing trend, an epidemic, and it's complicated. There are so many drivers. There are things that are happening inside workplaces, certainly things happening from just like a macro global standpoint that is leading to continued feelings of stress, isolation, loneliness. So it's a really, really complicated topic. And when we get down to thinking about manager burnout and a lot of the new statistics, trends that are coming out around managers who are kind of in that middle squeeze position, kind of caught between executive leadership, trying to support their teams, increasingly with less resources. There's so much more to unpack, so we'll get into all of it, but thrilled to be talking about this topic today. So quick intros. I'm Allison Campbell. I'm the founder of unBurnt, a company focused on burnout prevention solutions. So new frameworks, ideas, taking a preventative approach, helping companies and teams thrive. And I'm here with Kirsten Zeigler, and I'm just so excited she's here. We connected late last year, and we're just super aligned in a lot of the approaches. So Kirsten's a human resources expert. She's the founder of KDZ HR Consulting, and she works with founders. And I just love her approach, helping to build equitable workplaces through consulting, workshops, speaking engagements, and really taking an approach to help cultivate cultures that connect with the founders while also giving them the space to build people strategies as they're scaling the company in keeping with their original mission. So just love the work that Kirsten's doing. I'm going to turn it over to you to kick us off, and let's just get into it. This is meant to be really informal. If more folks join, we'll invite them in. So we're going to talk manager burnout, what's going on, some of the trends underlying drivers. And then we're going to talk about things that we can actually do. So individually, as well as from a people perspective within companies, some actionable skills and tips. So Kirsten, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. So I just shared my screen. Can everybody see it? Yeah,
Yes.
thumbs up. Great. So horrible statistics. Let's start there. We have more than 75% of employees and 63% of managers experience burnout. I know that when I saw that, I was unfortunately not surprised. Is anybody else surprised by that? You can just nod, shake your head, yes, no. 58% of employees and managers strongly agree that they're mentally exhausted, and 54% agree that they're strongly overwhelmed in their role. So that's more than half. That's a huge number. And this was cited from the Columbus CEO. Some additional things in 2025, 45% of middle managers reported experiencing burnout. And I know that a lot of us can relate to that. I know that I can, especially in my past careers, working in corporate. And last but not least, the impact on employee retention is huge. Workers who are burnt out are nearly 3 times more likely to be actively searching for another job. And that, creates so much turmoil in an organization, not just financially for the organization themselves, but think about the team, the workload, what happens to that team when people leave. So, or burnt out workers stay and their mental, physical, and emotional health suffers, and also their productivity suffers. So it's a lose-lose for everybody. So those are just some statistics to start off this webinar. Allison, should I kick it back to you?
Yeah. And I want to dig in. It's always helpful. Thank you so much. Love some numbers to ground us, and I think it is staggering, though also not surprising because of the tension. There's so much going on in this post-pandemic workplace, trying to figure out virtual hybrid. So we'll get into some of the additional drivers. But it's interesting because so many people that I've talked to about this topic are both, alarmed by the stats, but also not surprised. So, wanna dig in.
I feel that I have not met someone that's alarmed by that yet. Because they feel it, which is unfortunate, because so many people are feeling this.
Yeah, I think, it's let's get into the drivers. For me, it's also a commentary on how we've continued to normalize and accept exhaustion, right? We sort of think, like it or not, it is part of the program, and it's just the way we have to operate. And, particularly in a season of life as we're climbing and we're trying to grow our careers, potentially also balancing growing our families, we kind of have just somewhere along the line accepted it as normal that we're going to experience bouts of burnout. Exhaustion is part of the program. And I think for managers increasingly would love to dig into like what's going on, why. So I have some theories. Kirsten, I'd love to hear, just based on the work you're doing, founders, as companies are beginning to scale and add that management layer, or potentially remove, because that's also a growing trend, is really flattening organizations through these layoffs. Like, what are you seeing? What's going on with that middle manager layer in terms of getting pinched?
Yeah. So what I see a lot from like a peer perspective, a lot of people are promoted into manager roles because that's just the next step. They may not have any interest in being a manager because a manager position is different than an individual contributor, right? You're not focusing on that specific skill set, that specific task that you may be interested in, that you've built your career on, that you were hired to do. And the only next place to go is to be a manager. And I have had so many conversations with people who are about, I would say, getting up to maybe those like director level or senior manager level roles. And they feel so stuck and burnt out because leadership is not the place that they want to spend their time. So now they're forced into these leadership positions, but still expected to do, that skill specific individual contributor work. And they are overwhelmed. I think that, organizations kind of need to take a look at not just why these people are so overwhelmed, but also what could be the next step for someone who doesn't want to lead a team. Like there should be options available for promotion, for pay increases, right? Even maybe your title stays the same, but you have increasing knowledge and responsibility in your field. So I think that structurally, there's a huge problem just to begin with. And that doesn't even touch on the people that actually want to be in those leadership management positions, right? And then how we fail them from there. From I would say a business owner perspective, I think it's really hard for, I work with primarily small businesses right now, and I've been in corporate, but right now I work with small businesses, and I think sometimes it's hard for leaders of a small business to really train their newly appointed managers. So a lot of the times, they're building out their organization from the ground up. It's their first time giving people these responsibilities and kind of like delegating themselves and kind of letting go themselves. And so no one has taught them, for the most part, how to lead a team. Therefore, they're not teaching their managers how to do that either. And so there's definitely that like training aspect too that comes into play.
So many insights there. I think so. I'd love to start first with that fork in the road. You're awesome at your job, you're an individual contributor, and you have potentially the choice, although to kind of piggyback on what you just said, sometimes it doesn't feel like a choice. You're kind of forced into leadership and managing a team. But if you're at that fork in the road, how can organizations better support a path to, that enables you to grow in the organization, have increasing visibility, responsibility, but maybe isn't a people leader role? Like what juncture, how do you evaluate that? How do companies support that? And then we'll talk about the flip. If you do want to be the leader, how to better support. So let's talk first about the IC. I don't want to manage people, but I want to grow here at the organization. What does that look like?
I think that, and obviously every company is different. Every, skill set or like role department is different. But, I'm going to use an example of like, I have a lot of friends in tech, right? And they've been really good at what they do. They're developers, they are focused. They are maybe not people people, right? Like they're not extroverts. They like to do what they do. And now their only option is to be a manager of a team. And so I think that for those types of positions, I think it's somewhat easy, I would say, to create these elevated roles in those skill specifics, right? Like give those people more authority over their job, over the tech aspect of it. Maybe they can provide mentorship. Maybe they can provide training to the team. Maybe they can provide learning experiences, but they're not in charge of those team members day to day and their growth. I would really recommend having someone that's more of a people leader, right? Of like maybe a general manager of some sort, depending on the size of the team, that's really in charge in collaboration with like the skill specific lead, right? So making them a lead, let's say, and providing those learning opportunities is helpful, and having those people work together in forming somebody else's growth and career. It frees up that person's time from doing day-to-day tasks, providing that manager experience, but also allows them to teach and other people to learn from them.
Interesting. I think having a senior IC expert, perhaps even paired with a people leader, right?
Yes.
That actually feels like a very complementary hybrid approach to having the right level of seniority, institutional knowledge, where you're not losing people because they feel like, well, if I want to continue to move up or get a raise, I'm going to have to jump ship and go to a new organization. I love the idea of pairing them up potentially with the people leader to help infuse a team with some of that sort of on the ground skills expert. I'm an expert in this domain space. So I love that. That's a really cool approach. What about for people who identify that they do want to be a manager? To your point, it's a transition. You know, you are a rock star at what you do day to day, but you have to learn skills that are inherent to leading people, leading teams. There's a new motion with managing up and setting expectations with what can be delivered. So what does it look like before the promotion actually happens? Like, how do we better, I guess, set people up for success to become emerging managers and leaders versus just plopping them into a role? Now you have a team of people. Like, what are some things we can do before that promotion actually happens?
I think it's a fine balance because, you don't want to say, okay, give this person some like manager responsibility, because sometimes if their peers may not listen, may take it less seriously, may feel threatened in a way, right? So I think it is a delicate balance, but I think that learning opportunities, training, coaching ahead of that would be really important, even to even figure out, yes, this is for me, or no, it's not for me. Like, I think a 1 hour coaching session could really get to the bottom of that, with a leadership coach. And then from there, it's really about developing those skills, right? Those communication skills, those expectation setting skills, delegation, active listening is huge. And also it's a transition to go from working with your peers to then having to, tell them what to do. And so I really think that any person that's promoted into a management role is going to face a lot of challenges that somebody else from an outside organization maybe wouldn't face, because they're having that change not only in their role, but they have to relate to people differently too. And, make sure that they're a respected authority figure in a way, so any sort of leadership coaching or training, I think, is so important, specifically for new managers, like especially for new managers. And so, whether that be an outside consultant, maybe there's someone on the team, if it's a larger team that's like, really loves leadership and they could be a mentor for that person. I think that mentor opportunities within organizations are underutilized. It doesn't have to be your direct boss, right? It can be someone that you respect that you can go to for questions just about your career, about, not job specific too. And so, yeah, by providing that space and that training for people, I think that is always the best place to start.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the testing ground of potentially some learning, but also qualifying, in theory, I want to be a leader. In theory, I want the promotion. Like, let me get my feet wet and get some, relevant experience to your point in a way that sets them up to be credible and, have influence, but also really gauge whether or not it's right for them. Because so often we're kind of shepherded along, right? And it's just the next logical path. And people jump in and they find themselves a few years later looking around like, I actually didn't want this. And that's totally fine and okay too. So I like the idea of qualifying and just getting a little bit more of that litmus test early on to determine, and maybe it'll be right in another set of years, but really understanding what's right based on where you are today. So in prepping for this, one of the stats that was wildly alarming to me, I'm just going to say it, was that 2/3 of managers say that they're sitting in meetings. So it's alarming and also not surprising. Same commentary. 2/3 of managers are saying they can't even get to the people leadership aspect of their role because they're sitting in meetings for 75% of their day or more, right? So this leads to, and I lived it, signing on a night to catch up, scrambling from call to call, all of the context switching, the feeling of overwhelm because every meeting you go to typically leads to more action items, more thoughts, which is great, but no time to process, no time to really digest what's going on and to alter plans if needed, right? We're just kind of back to back. And when you're a people leader and then you have one-on-one coaching, potentially performance issues, like there's no space for that. And it leads to a tremendous amount of stress. So I'd love to just dig in, first get your thoughts, what you're seeing and hearing, and then let's talk about some ways that we can think about, meeting culture. I'll ask some follow-up questions, but first just want to open it up to your thoughts on this.
This is such a big problem everywhere. So many people have this issue, whether they're leaders or not, to be honest. Obviously, leaders have more of this problem. The one of the last bigger corporate jobs I worked in-house for, we ended up going through this exercise where I set up a tree, should this be a meeting? And it was a set of, a choose your own adventure type of situation where you would answer questions to determine what the next step is, if that thing should be a meeting, or if it could be an email that's sent out, if it can be a voice, a video that you send out to show people things. I think evaluating what needs to be done in meetings is a big thing, and then evaluating what could be used in other forms of communication. It's kind of setting the rules of engagement, which I think could be helpful for so many things, for communication, for meetings, in general, for burnout. I think setting your own rules of communication when it comes to that, there are so many things that this could solve. But I really do think also organizations can have a mindset where they're empowering their leaders to put a cap on how many meetings per week they have. And that'll really force people to determine what's absolutely necessary or not. And so by saying maybe, you have X amount of internal meetings per week. And, this shouldn't count if you are in a position where you have to meet with clients consistently, like that. If you're in a sales role, that's a different set, I would say, of standards. But for internal meetings, set a cap for the week, and it'll really force you to determine, should I be attending this? Should it be a follow-up? Should I just be included in the meeting notes so that I know what happened? Do I just need oversight? What is my role in this meeting? I think that assigning roles for meetings is really helpful too. So why is this person being invited? Is it optional for them? Make sure they know it's optional for them. If there is no action item you need from them during this meeting, they could probably just have the recap, right? Make sure you're always taking notes and sending out recaps and action items after. Some things absolutely need meetings, though. I think that, when you're a manager or a leader, you should absolutely be doing one-on-ones with everyone that reports to you, whether those generally, I would say bi-weekly. Some organizations have it set up where they do them weekly because, they're a tiny team. They have enough time to do that. They like that, contact. Maybe they're remote, so that's like their
Mhm.
connection point. It really depends on your business. I also know some people that do it monthly, but generally what I see is bi-weekly, setting that space for communication between, that employee and that manager. And it allows, you to go over what's working, what's not, what roadblocks the person is facing. It just really allows that open line of communication. So for something like that, I would say don't give that up, right? But maybe if it's, a different meeting, you can let that one go. So, trying to figure out your role in all of these, I think is really important.
Yeah, I think that's great feedback. I think it's really important, and one of the things I talk to clients about is doing an audit, because sometimes it actually just becomes a little bit of this perpetual, it's been on my calendar forever and I just continue to attend. So really cleaning that up is helpful. But the other thing that's becoming increasingly, I think, more important is truly categorizing, because we have
Mhm.
the benefit of AI being able to scan and give us notes and actions. The challenge that I'm finding, so I want to spend a couple minutes here, is that increasingly people are using meetings as their way to be informed. So even if
Mhm.
they're not participating, there's not an action, they don't have to have a deliverable, speak in the meeting, and there's no action coming out of the meeting, they're joining simply to remain informed. And when we're doing that, for a large percentage of our week, we're not freed up to do the focus work. We're not freed up to
Right.
meet one-on-one with our team. And to me, that points to a fundamental flaw where there's not good communication, there's not good sort of progress and reporting on
Yeah.
progress. And so people are joining meetings just to know what's going on. Let's talk about that. Like, what are some of the ways we can intercept that when we see those pain points happening, so that people can actually, if they're optional, maybe not attend and just read the meeting notes?
Yeah, I think that honestly, good meeting notes is the answer, right? Like not just something that your, AI note taker is taken, but like if I'm on a meeting, I'm always taking notes for my own self for reference points, but having someone be like appointed, again, the roles in a meeting, have someone be the note taker that sends the follow up after, because not only does that keep people informed, but it also is very clear on any action items that need to happen, any dates that were set, any things that have been completed, so that there doesn't need to be another meeting that happens on the same thing. I recommend this seriously for any kind of meeting, just to do that follow up email to say, hey, just so we're all on the same page, this is what we talked about. This person's doing this person's doing that. We're good to go. We probably don't need another meeting about this. um, and assigning, those duties and tasks. If I need to know what's happening, then I'll just look and say, okay, great. This person's doing this person's doing that. This was discussed. This is finished. This wasn't. And that should suffice. So I think that also not just assigning the note taker, but being clear on what the expectations are of those notes, right? To say, great, you're the
Mhm.
note taker. This is how it should go, so that everyone's informed, so that everyone doesn't have to be on this meeting, and spend their time in places they don't need to.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think having a template, potentially having kind of a team norm, something that's templatized, you're not recreating it every time, could be a very helpful solve there. Um, I'm going to ask, are there questions? Feel free to pop them in the chat. I want to make sure we're taking this in a direction around manager burnout that's helpful, whether it's looking for tips, trying to understand potentially some of the places to diagnose. Feel free at any point to pop questions in the chat. Just wanted to throw that out there. Um, if not, I'm going to keep going because I feel like there's a lot more that we had planned to talk about. Um, so I'd love to take a look at just the general perspective you have on generational differences, right? I'm seeing headlines, I'm seeing articles around potentially less Gen Z, and this is a broad statement, so let's unpack
Mhm.
it. But Gen Z maybe being less interested in ever taking on people
Yeah.
leadership because they're seeing sort of what's going on. They're looking at their leaders, they're seeing how stressed out they are, and they're like, I don't want that. They're looking for something different. So, first, I'd love your commentary on this, what you're seeing. And, potentially some ways that we can think about, yes, creating paths. Let's go back to what we talked about earlier, but also like how to maybe set up role models and other mentor programs so we can model, what great looks like. So first, what are you
Mhm.
seeing and hearing on this topic?
I've seen that happen with like Gen X too. So I think it's just something that's starting to happen across the board, like something stands out so specifically in my mind of a situation where there was this amazing woman that worked for the company I was working with, and she was so well respected and they wanted to promote her to like a VP role, and she was like, absolutely not. Like I want to spend time with my family still. I want to be able to have a life outside of this. And to me, that was just such a commentary on the company, not
Mm,
her, right? Like this person is making the best choice for themselves. And the company was just like, all right, she's not going to take it. And they were upset about it, but they couldn't fathom that there was an actual root cause of that.
yeah.
Um, I think that feeling supported in these types of positions is really important, right? So yes, you're like a manager, but who's above you? Who is supporting you, right? Like, is it the CEO of the company? Is it a VP? Whoever that is, it starts at the top. So, people need to be trickling down from the top, and behaviors needed to be changed from the top in order to create these positions that people want to be in and can be in. And I think a lot of that has to do with setting boundaries in a way, for their time, determining, okay, well, our culture is, we work 40 hours a week. That is it. If you're working more than that, there's a problem. Let's figure out how to solve that problem, right? Or you need to take a day off, which means not checking your emails. And therefore, the CEO of the company is doing the same thing. They're leading by example. They're not expecting people to answer or send emails during their time off or respond to text messages or whatever that may be. Setting standards from the top is the only way, in my opinion, to fix that problem.
Yeah. Yes, and I'm seeing some of the comments about across all generations. I want people wanting to move back to IC roles. I think for me, absolutely, it does come down to modeling because it's tricky. I actually wrote about this today. Setting boundaries, it's really easy to say, we
Oh,
support time off, take your paid time off. But if you don't feel like you're supported in being disconnected, or there's an expectation that you are checking at night because something could happen, that's where people, I think, get really stressed out that they're trying to establish a healthy boundary, but it's not being respected. They can't maintain it. The culture doesn't support what they're saying they're encouraging people to do. And it's kind of putting the responsibility back on individuals inside a culture and a system that is not super supportive, to your point. So what else does support look like, to your point? If you're looking up and you're saying, who's my manager? Don't know that I want their job. In addition
right.
to modeling, what are some other ways that we can really surround employees, managers, senior leaders in support so that they can show up and do their best work? They can disconnect and rest and recharge. What does that look like?
I think it's really important for whoever's in charge to have an understanding of the time people are spending doing things, right? So if you have that person who is being forced to like back on after dinner to finish work during the day, why? That's a problem. Like that shouldn't happen. You need to figure out why. Is it that they need more support on their team, right? Is it that they're doing too much work? They're a manager, but they're doing too much individual contributor work. There there's adjustments that need to be made, but you need to be in tune enough to figure out why. So, like, I'm a manager, I'm going to be reporting to somebody, right? Unless I'm like the CEO or the business owner, I'm reporting to somebody. So, that somebody also needs to be doing check ins with me biweekly, right? To make sure that they're understanding what my roadblocks are. Then in turn, though, it's up to me to sometimes raise the red flag also. I think that as managers, as people, we need to really advocate for ourselves because we can't. Yes, leaders need to be in tune with their people and have an understanding and oversight. And yes, it is to a degree expected that they pick up on things, but a lot of those things that they can pick up on aren't going to happen until your behavior has changed. Your, priorities are slipping. You're not
Mhm.
completing things on time. You're working 24/7. It's up to you to raise your hand before those things happen to say, "Hey, I'm having a hard time getting all of this done.
Yeah.
This is where I think the gap is," right? Like I don't have anyone to delegate this to. I don't have anyone that's skilled enough to do XYZ, right? That doesn't mean that you're going to get like a new person, new headcount added immediately, but maybe there are some changes that can happen. Maybe your manager has advice or ideas on how to redistribute some of that. So I do think it's equally as important, right, for
Yes.
someone to be paying attention and listening, but then also for you to be advocating for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think it's very, very important that we continue to normalize saying when it's too much. I think
Yes.
there's a fear that I'll be penalized.
Yeah.
The reality is that is true in some cultures. And so
Yeah.
what I typically talk to clients about, just in networking in general, is continuing to promote this idea that we should be raising our hand. To your point, I think many more managers than not do want to be able to help support a rebalance effort or a, hey, we can't hire right now, but let's creatively look at what's going on in the next quarter. I think if the answer is this is the pace tough, and you don't get that reinforcement that you've said this is too much or I'm overwhelmed, this is not sustainable in the long term, then that actually is information that will
Yeah.
enable you to make a decision. Either you can accept that for a period of time or not and move on. So
Yeah.
I think the fear of sometimes speaking up um, absolutely holds us back. It's real. I
Agreed.
fell into that in my career where I just felt like, well, let me just push through. I don't want to admit it. I'm sure I'll be able to figure this out. But the reality is I actually wish a lot earlier in my career I had said, you know what, I'm doing two people's jobs or whatever it may be, to have gauged earlier if it was a supportive environment or not. And I was in many supportive
Absolutely.
environments, but I think really rooting that out sooner than later is super important.
And I also think for businesses and business owners, they need to be clear about what type of environment they want to create, right? Like I've worked with companies who have said, no, like we have to be on 24/7. That's the nature of our business. That's the culture here, right? Like we have clients that we support who expect us to be that way. And I say, okay, great. You need to make sure every candidate that you interview knows that, right? And for the most part, like I still work with, that business. That's upfront in the interview process. And it's
Mhm.
the candidates are on board because that's what they want to do. That's the type of environment they want to be in. Other business owners, are like, no, I don't want that happening. And it's like, great, then you need to set those standards for yourself, right? Like if you want an environment or a culture that is like family friendly, then you need to be setting up flexible work hours. Like you need to practice what you preach, basically.
Yeah, I think the expectations match versus mismatch is a really important point.
Yeah.
So I want to go to a question from Lacey. She's talking about, and Lacey, are you still preparing? I'm happy to read this question if you can't come off camera.
I can come off camera.
Okay. I just didn't want to speak for you if you were able to come on. So it's a great question.
Okay, yeah, do you want me to, I guess, paraphrase it? So right now I'm a director. I just started a month ago. It's a very chaotic environment. It's essentially like a startup culture, highly regulated. So a lot of the things my team does, it's like it needs to be dealt with right away. And I have two direct reports, and one he was the first person in this department. He's a manager, but he honestly isn't qualified for the role, which isn't his fault. Like he was set up to fail, essentially. And I'm in a situation now where I'm trying to find the balance of just jumping in and doing the work because it needs to be
Mhm.
done, but also trying to coach and trying to give
Yeah,
feedback and all of that. So it's a lot.
that's hard. I see that happen a lot, especially in like smaller companies, right? Where people are hired in these inflated titles, and it hurts everyone in the long run. Are there ways for you to do the work while coaching? So like maybe that be like, I don't know if you guys work remote. Do you work remote?
It's
Yeah.
remote, yeah.
So maybe it's like a screen share, right? Of you saying, hey, I'm going to, like, if you have things that also are done similarly, like maybe you guys get on a screen share and record it too, to say, this is how you do these things. I would say tech is your best friend in these types of situations. And like, when it comes to that kind of stuff, it's always going to be a little bit of a heavier lift, unfortunately, in the beginning, right? Because like the goal is you want to train that person
Mhm.
to be able to take it on. But unfortunately, they haven't been trained yet. And now that falls on you. So, how can you do it in a way where you're not doing anything extra? For me, it's always recording things and just like sending it to someone, keeping it in a place. But also, you might be able to determine pretty quickly if you think this person is trainable or not, too. That, I mean, that's something else to think about.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I have been trying to do the screen shares like you said, but I haven't done the record. So I like that and I'll try that out. And then yeah, I think the trainability part is where I'm already seeing some challenges and need trying to find the balance of not overworking this early on, but feeling like I need to spend like a whole like weekend day just to put training guides together because I can't get to it during my normal working hours.
Is that something you could delegate though if you record it all and then say, hey, can you make a guide out of this?
Oh, that's a good idea,
I
actually. I didn't
think,
think about that.
you know, doing help, doing the import, like not the important work, but you doing that training is what you're responsible for, right? Like, and so then being able to delegate any of that more like admin stuff, do it as much as you can, you know?
Thank you. That's a good
Yeah,
tip.
of course.
That's a great suggestion. I also am curious, have you, and being a month in, you're still kind of learning his style, assessing to your point, trainability. I'm just curious if you've gotten a sense if he's happy or he feels like he's in the right role, in the wrong role. Maybe within the first 90 days, you can have that conversation around how's it going? Like, how does this feel? And, sometimes people are like, this is great. And there's like a little bit of a mismatch in their perception of performance versus yours. But he also might be feeling like this is not the right thing for me. And so I'm just curious if like what your sense is there.
Yeah, the interesting thing is last week my boss did their performance reviews from last year and told them, because there's another one in the same situation, that they essentially are meeting expectations, which now I feel feels like sets me up for an even bigger challenge because I'm like, I've been here a month and they're not meeting my expectations on what their job description says. But I did want to do in a one-on-one, bring that up. Like, what are your career goals? Like, are there areas of this function that you enjoy doing that you don't enjoy doing? Like, what did you think about your review? Like, trying to assess that. Like, does he want to be a people manager one day, or does he want to stay in an IC role? So I can, yeah, get a better sense of that too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think those two things combined, like you continuing to figure out how to assess, but also I love the suggestion of do the training. He picks up maybe some of the creation around the
Mhm.
training manuals. And then, yeah, just the conversation on like how he's feeling in terms of fit.
Thanks.
Let
Yeah.
us know how it goes. Now I need
Yes,
to
I know.
know.
I'm interested too. So yes, keep me posted for sure. It's tough. It's tricky when you're stepping into, especially, a new role, and maybe now your expectations aren't aligned with where, the bar was, which inherently is probably why, there's a little bit of that mismatch. Okay, cool. Well, thank you for that question. I typically like to keep these to 45 to 50 minutes so folks have a breather before their next hour. So just wanted to ask Marita, do you have any questions, anything that you wanted, any commentary? Loved, again, your insight around what you're seeing with people going back to IC roles. There's so much more we could dig into. I know, Kirsten, we had like several back and forths on all the data and workload management, and I feel like we've touched on a lot of it. So just wanted to give space though for folks before their next hour.
Yeah, no, this is like my bread and butter. So it was really fun to hear you guys talk up through it and some of the different perspectives. And I think it's definitely shifting the environment and the need for managers to get more resources and training. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't have anything to add, but this was super, super relevant to my world, and really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you. And appreciate you joining. Lacey, great to see you. Appreciate you joining. And I think, again, there's a lot to continue to unpack and think about. So even just coming off the prep for this session, I have some thoughts around future newsletters and just, continuing the dialogue around, how do we continue to support, but want to incentivize people, like put the right things in place for organizations to be set up for success, for people to be set up for success, make sure we're finding alignment versus just forcing these mismatched situations. So I have a lot of thoughts about some future sessions and other materials. So stay tuned. Kirsten, thank you so much. This was awesome. So much fun.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Yes, so much fun. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. So I guess we'll leave it there for today. And again, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Take care.